whatever your thorn is, whether your thorn is some of the more conventional things, whether it's food, whether it's alcohol, whether it's an endless cycle of casual sex which you don't choose, whether it is any one number of 1,000 things, whether it is depression, whether it is loneliness, whether it is agoraphobia. These things are not put there just to make our lives miserable. I've got a little quote that I'd like to go through now. And I've used it before and I'll use it again. It's from the movie Short Bus. And at the end of that movie, after they've been through this elaborate and extraordinary process, this great cavalcade of excess in every single department, the sense is that the characters in this movie have settled into a position where they are reconciled to themselves and ready to grow from that point. They're not continually trying to tear away from themselves the bits that actually make them themselves, but they're willing to grow. And the drag queen, which has been one of the major figures in this, is being carried through a huge party on the shoulders of everybody. And she is singing, "Your demons become your own best friends." Well, remember that when St. Paul talks about Satan, and when we talk about Satan, Satan in the Old Testament was an angel of God, a messenger of God. Satan means the accuser, doing God's business, sent to be that thorn in our flesh, sent to nudge us in the direction of growth. Satan was not what Satan became later on. Later on in the medieval period, Satan had a whole load of Greek mythology and Roman mythology draped over the concept. And we ended up with a glorified god Pan with big horns and red skin. But if you look at Job, and you look at much of Scripture, you see this accuser as the wise counsel of God sent into human life to challenge and urge into growth, not to give comfort, not to just force us to settle, and not to keep us in a rut. I was saying we've got some very good news, of course. Kate is visiting us from North London, but she's come directly here from Austin, Texas, where they've been having a REVM conference, which is a Readiness to Enter the Vocational Ministry conference that MCC holds every year. And hopefully some people from this church will be going next year. That can have a round of applause for that. But Kate was accepted and is now in care status, and in maybe 3 years' time will be ordained as a pastor in Metropolitan Community Churches, which is a wonderful thing. And as much as anybody has any advice to give, I said, you don't have to have defeated all your demons, but you at least have to know them by name. In order to pastor a church, you don't have to have defeated them. That happens possibly, hopefully, after death. But you at least have to be able to name them. Because these things that creep up on you, if you have no self-awareness, if you have no examined life, we are continually being batted around from pillar to post like a shuttlecock in a game of badminton. Does that translate easily into American? They do play badminton over here, don't they? Sometimes I will be rattling off for a long time. A vacant expression over people's faces. And I think, oh, what did I say that they don't understand? I thought, well, I can't go all the way back now. I'm just going to have to keep ranting on and hope that they'll work it out later on. But no. Self-awareness, naming those demons, naming those thorns in your flesh, is part of the route to happiness, and being able to embrace humility. And by humility I mean being able to say, well, that was a disaster. When it was a disaster is the most liberating thing you can do. I very much doubt that I will be married now. I would probably be 6 foot under if I hadn't got any glimpse of what a liberating thing it is in a marriage to be able to say, oh, I completely screwed that up, didn't I? Embracing your failures is part of that paradox. Because through embracing your failures, you become stronger. The human urge when you are wounded is for vengeance, and yet that only makes you weaker. It is forgiveness that gives strength. Again, that Christian paradox working itself out in our lives. The victim of violence, the victim of rape, the victim of terrible crimes is forever in the power of the person who perpetrated those crimes unless they can find forgiveness and reclaim power through weakness. We've seen this in our society and beyond, in the extraordinary things that happened in South Africa when everyone was predicting a bloodbath, where the urge must have been for revenge, and yet instead transformation through humility and weakness of a clear effort to listen to those who had been the oppressor. The Truth and Reconciliation Committees that were held and that were instigated by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and also by Nelson Mandela. That was an extraordinary process. South Africa became, in a very short space of time, a country which had moved from terrible oppression and apartheid to being the only country in the world to have full lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender equality enshrined in its constitution. How did that happen? How do transformations like that happen? They happen because people are willing to break the cycle. People are willing to abandon our animal inheritance, which screams revenge at us, and instead go for something else entirely. It's not only in those big things, it also applies in the small things and in the everyday things, in our relationships, especially in our marriages. All it is an admission of truth. All it is the willingness to let go a fond fantasy which makes you feel powerful for a reality which actually makes you powerful. I'm going to finish with another reading from 1 Corinthians, as I'm having a very St. Paul sort of sermon today. While Jews clamour for miraculous demonstrations and Greeks go in for philosophical wisdom, we go right on proclaiming Christ, the crucified. Jews treat this like an anti-miracle, and Greeks pass it off as absurd. But to us who are personally called by God, both Jews and Greeks, Christ is God's ultimate miracle, and wisdom all wrapped up in one. Human wisdom is so tinny, so impotent, next to the seeming absurdity of God. Human strength can't begin to compete with God's weakness. Take a good look, friends, at who you were when you got called into this life. I don't see many of the brightest and the best amongst you. Not many influential, not many from high society families. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses, chooses these nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of the somebodies? That makes it quite clear that none of you can get by with blowing your own horn before God. Everything that we have, right thinking and right living, a clean slate and a fresh start, comes from God by way of Jesus Christ. That's why we have the same. If you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God. Last night, another one of those wonderful situations where, because of your faithfulness, I get to represent you. Leon and I went to the Human Rights Campaign dinner last night, the fundraiser, because somebody was very kindly enough to donate tickets for us. And I was a little embarrassed. We turned up there and Leon and I were plastered all over the programme, our photograph. We were all over the advertising material. My picture and film was all over the PowerPoint they were showing at the Prop 28 demonstration last November, and I thought,